Hi, this is Ellen McDonald. We're beginning analysis C of case 1. Dr. Shahrdar says, if you consider a presupposed EBV epidemic as the genius epidemicus and report its landmarks, you will find a set of remedies. They can be repertorized in the Repertorium Bureausum software. So we're going to look at this idea of an EBV epidemic. What is an epidemic? First of all, let's consider why EBV is an epidemic. Immunity to EBV is easily gained during childhood. So it usually looks like a cold and nobody even remembers what happened. Nobody knows that the child was exposed to EBV. But if that child doesn't get exposure and doesn't get sick from EBV as a child, it's a much more serious disease if he gets it when he's a teenager or as an adult. This case was he got EBV when he got IM, which was caused by EBV, when he was a teenager. And in general, the serious EBV diseases of adults are caused by a childhood environment that is too clean. In other words, if the environment were more dirty, the chances of getting EBV would be much greater. So my guess is these children who are drinking well water and living a very natural life outside are probably exposed to EBV, and they don't get mononucleosis. EBV is not the only virus that is not good for children but is bad for adults. Again, so this is, you have to repertorize. EBV causes IM about 30 to 50% of the time, and I've seen lots of different reports here. I'm not too sure about these statistics. I think it must be very hard to measure, because if children are being exposed to it, who's going to be able to measure it, right? Because it's a cold that just disappears and nobody thinks that anything, nobody even notices or takes the child to the doctors to see what has happened because the cold is too small, too insignificant. Other viruses cause IM also, so you need to repertorize based on your symptoms. In this course, there'll be lab tests and patients report, but this kind of information is not enough to choose EBV as your miasm. Case 2 will have a case of CMV, and it's similar to EBV. It's a very different symptomology, but it's similar in that you can get it as a child and never know because it will look like a passing flu or cold. Also, EBV causes many other diseases that could start with IM, but they become other diseases later on because the body is weakened. Why does EBV become a miasm? The obvious is that allopathy does not try to cure hidden diseases that lack simple, clear physical symptoms. And the other reason is that historically, humans have not fully adapted to EBV, so they get sick, and it causes suffering, but it doesn't usually kill us. If it doesn't kill us until the time when we reproduce, then the disease can persist because it stays with you throughout your life. It enters the DNA and it's there for life. This is true of all viruses. Viruses reproduce by entering the DNA, so they are there with us throughout life. Dr. Shahrdar says, if you consider a presupposed EBV epidemic as the genius epidemicus, now I'm going to look at this word, genius epidemicus, and I hope that you'll be able to understand what he's saying more clearly. In your town, if there's a homeopathy doctor who's very busy has a very busy clinic and has many people who he's seeing, he will also have many cases of flu, okay, or of whatever the epidemic disease is, mumps. And he will collect all the symptoms of not one person, but of all his patients for the same disease. And after he sees 2 or 3 patients, probably more than that, but if he's very good, Hahnemann says with 2 or 3, he should be able to find the genus Epidemicus, if he's very good. But after he's seen enough patients, he will choose from the group. And if you have a smaller practice, you see fewer students, you may rely on his remedy just because you are dealing with the same population. People live close to one another and they share the same disease symptoms. You rely on somebody else's information because his experience or the number of patients that he has is greater than yours, and so he has a larger group to draw symptoms from. So you can be more sure of his genus epidemicus remedy. Now, what we're looking at here is a miasm example, and although he uses the word genus epidemicus, Dr. Shahrdar uses the word genus epidemicus, the usage is a little bit different. If you look at the organon at aphorism 203, you'll see him talking about chronic wasting diseases. And this is sort of the same thing as a miasm. Organon is written way before the chronic diseases, but he's talking about the same kind of situation. The diseases become chronic. Okay, so I'm going to try to compare the 2 uses. Dr. Shahrdar uses a medical textbook to gather his symptoms. I'm not sure, I don't think he just uses one, but many textbooks to get the symptoms of contagious diseases. In this example, it's EBV, which are the result of data on a large number of patients. So the patient group is the patient group who are proved to have become sick because of EBV. That's the group. It's kind of an abstract group. It's not that Dr. Shahrdar has seen these patients. He's using medical textbooks. He repertorizes those symptoms in synthesis, in radar or in some homeopathic program, but he uses synthesis to produce a symptom list like this. Just like the doctor in your hometown who has many patients. He made a symptom list, but it's based on medical textbooks. So we are relying on the doctor's deeper medical knowledge. So when you have a paucity of symptoms case, you have a case that lacks useful symptoms, paucity, you use his repertory to repertorize the symptoms of your patient. You find a miasm that matches your patient's symptoms. Okay, so this is the same kind of work that we ordinarily do in homeopathy. You are matching your patient's symptoms to a remedy that has certain symptoms. So you're matching symptoms. Miasms have certain symptoms, and you're matching symptoms. According to Dr. Shahdar's representation of that miasm symptoms, he gives you a remedy list. That's why you can match. You match your patient's classical repertorized remedies to his list to find the best fit. Now, so this is what in analysis B, this is what he showed us that he did. So when is a genus epidemicus remedy needed? It's needed when the symptoms are so strong that they overwhelm the characteristics of the individual victim of the epidemic. For example, if Someone has cowpox. This is in farm countries where people get something like smallpox, but a much less dangerous disease. If they get this cowpox, and then they get smallpox, the cowpox symptoms disappear, and smallpox becomes the dominant disease. This is an example that you can find in the Organon. If you consider a presupposed EBV epidemic as the genus Epidemicus and repertorize its landmarks, you can find a set of remedies. They can be repertorized in the Repertorium Virosum. Compare these two genus Epidemicus situations. The first one is the primary infection of a contagious disease. The second one is a miasm. It's a partially cured primary infection that leaves a miasmatic disease imprint. We're going to take this apart. This is the genus Epidemicus. This is one kind, this is another kind. In the case of an epidemic, for instance the flu, the group is treated as if it were one patient. The remedy that results from repertorizing the group the group characteristic pathological symptom from any local occurrence of an epidemic disease is called the genus Epidemicus. So these are all this is what happens with the flu. Okay. So you have a primary infection and the person heals and he's healthy and happy. Okay. The second possibility is there's a primary infection, there's IM or flu or something, and it's not healed. The symptoms remain, and there's a hidden struggle. It's hidden inside the person's body. He doesn't appear to be really sick, but he's not the same as he was here in this before he got sick. This is a never been well case. And then he adapts to this hidden struggle. His body adapts. And then there's some kind of stress or trauma. And suddenly he notices that he has some chronic disease symptom. Okay, so from the chronic disease, he doesn't go back to here. But actually from the chronic disease, there's a memory of the primary infection. So if the primary disease is a foot here, and the foot leaves an imprint, okay, these are the unhealed. I think that they're the unhealed symptoms, but I think this is not exactly what Dr. Shahrdar is saying. I'm not sure. Anyway, then you get something that's not totally the original footprint. It looks a little different. It's a hidden struggle. There's lots of wind blowing from trauma and stress, and he's got a hidden struggle, and he's trying to take care of the problem. And so it doesn't look exactly like EBV. It doesn't. He had mononucleosis, but it doesn't look exactly like it. And he adapts. There's more stress and trauma, and the next thing you know he has a chronic disease, okay? So this idea of an imprint is left, that it's not exactly the same thing. That's what you need to get out of this. The situation is different when a miasm is cured. Dr. Shahrdar is curing the miasm that results from failure to fully cure the primary infection. Okay, so what we are saying here, it's unhealed, it's not fully cured. The miasm contrast. The individual has adapted to the primary disease state, so his individual tendencies become important because this adaptation means that it's the special way that he has to adapt. And he is no longer in the primary state, so he's no longer in the primary disease state. So we have to individualize the case for miasmatic analysis. Remember, we had those small symptom remedies. He's individualizing it. The man is talkative, he's warm, there's some special things about him that are not peculiar to IM, they're peculiar to him. Okay, that's what we mean by individualize. And distinguish between the primary infection and the resulting miasmatic disease state. So here you have the group, and everybody has some kind of sickness, contagious disease, and you treat the group as one person. So that's the primary disease state here. Here, the disease has gone and affected many different parts of the body, and maybe this was cured, that was cured, but this was left. And we know about this disease state in books of research, this kind of thing in medicine, I think, is even computerized. And we know about what a disease like EBV, what the symptoms are, and it's the collective symptoms. This person may not have all of these symptoms, but the disease may be in all of these different parts of his body, and these are all in books. So this miasm, this is a miasm, is based on research of disease symptoms. So Dr. Shahrdar's research starts with the medical data. And landmark symptoms are chosen for each miasm. And these become the rubrics in the RV, in the Repertorium Virosum, okay, in Dr. Shahrdar's repertory. So that's why the landmark symptoms are very important. And then Dr. Shahrdar repertorized remedies for each miasm. And he found out which remedies are most common for that set of symptoms. He's already chosen symptoms, and so rubrics. He's already made rubrics, and then he sees which rubrics are the most common. So he repertorized it using synthesis. Dr. Shahrdar says, if you compare this set of remedies with the initial repertorization results of this case, you will again see that Kali-I is the best remedy, covering both sets with a high rank. So we choose Kali-I. Yay! Then you compare your RV findings to your classical findings. So here are his RV findings that we looked at before, and here are his classical findings. I've compared both lists, and if you look at this very carefully, you will see that there is no other shared rubrics except Kali-I. So even though this was low, relatively low, it supports the classical findings, which were not very convincing. So in a way, it provides a third leg to the stool, and we have a much more convincing argument. I hope to see you in the discussion with any questions or any effort to make this discussion deeper and more interesting. Thank you. Bye-bye.